So by 1606, the English still had yet to have a permanent settlement in the New World. By 1606, the Spanish are everywhere in the Americas, or just about everywhere in the Americas. As we talked about before, they'd completely taken over the Caribbean. They'd settled all throughout what's today Mexico, Central America, been throughout just about all areas of South America, permanent settlements all over the place. The Spanish had St. Augustine in Florida, a handful of missions. At this point, they're already up in New Mexico, but England has not had a permanent settlement yet. Now, as we discussed, they did have fishermen constantly coming up to this area of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, setting up temporary settlements to smoke fish. English traders have been going up and down the east coast of North America for 100 years at this point, trading furs, things like that with Indians. And as we talked about, English pirates had been coming down here in the Caribbean, setting up temporary bases to pirate Spanish shipping, but there still was not a permanent settlement. Now, we mentioned that in the 1580s, the English will try to have a permanent settlement. Basically, Sir Walter Raleigh wants to establish a pirate base in what's today North Carolina, but for a variety of reasons, including the initial tough dudes he sent over, upsetting the local population. This Roanoke settlement failed, and all the way up to 1606, it's still the same situation. Spain's everywhere. The English have fishing vessels, traders, and pirates, but nobody's there permanently just yet. Well, that's going to change in 1606 when a group of investors, learning from the mistakes Sir Walter Raleigh made, again, Roanoke, don't put it in a place that's hard to get to with supply vessels. Don't send a first expedition that upsets the locals. These guys are going to learn from Sir Walter Raleigh's mistakes. And one mistake I didn't point out, but I probably should. Sir Walter Raleigh simply didn't have enough money, being an individual, to fund this thing. He had sent one expedition, but then it took a while for a follow-up expedition. He had to raise additional capital, find new settlers. He didn't have enough money to send continuous supply vessels, so that was another reason his Roanoke colony failed. So his Roanoke colony failed, but the idea of a pirate base is a good one. People in England, these wealthy investors, say, man, if we can get something permanent, boy, it would be fantastic to raid these Spanish settlements down here and quickly pop in, drop the goods off, instead of having to constantly return back to England. And some of these English investors are going to say, if we got a permanent settlement, we could do even more than piracy. Perhaps we could find gold mines. Maybe, so the Spanish have found tons of silver down here. Maybe there's gold up here, or silver up here. We could send people in the interior there. And it might sound crazy because we know today how big North America is, but some people think maybe there's a passage to Asia this way. So the Spanish had been all around here. They discovered that there's no immediate path down there. You got to go all the way down to the south of South America, which is a costly, time-consuming journey. But what if there's a river that goes through the interior of the continent and pops us over at Asia? We can get to the silk, porcelain, and spices cheaper. And for the English, this is going to be difficult because you can get it from the Portuguese, but the Portuguese aren't particularly happy about trading with Protestants. So the English can get here. If they find a passage to Asia through the continent, that would be great. So just know in the early 1600s, a lot of people think this pirate base idea is great, and they think a permanent settlement would be good for other reasons. So what we're going to see in 1606 is a number of investors will decide we're going to fund a second attempt. So Roanoke failed, Sir Walter Raleigh failed, but his idea was good. And in 1606, this group of investors, just wealthy individuals, are going to form something called a joint stock company. Joint stock company, think about it like a corporation. So if you want to invest in Apple or whatever, you buy a stock in Apple, which means you owe a percentage of the company. So it's not going to be like Apple in that there are going to be millions of investors or whatever, but it will be a couple, I would say probably a dozen, 2 dozen investors are going to pool their money together and basically decide to fund this permanent settlement. And when it starts pirating stuff, we're going to get the goods back and we're going to make money off of it. So if they build this permanent pirate base, they start pirating Spanish shipping, we're going to get percentage of the silver, whatever they ship back. And maybe they can find gold mines, something like that. We'll make the money when they get back there as well. So again, using a modern example, if Elon Musk built a colony on Mars and then he's shipping back, he might not go himself, but the people he goes are now shipping back tons of diamonds. Elon Musk will make a ton of money off of it because he's the one that funded it. So that's what this Virginia company's going to do. We're going to fund it. They're going to make the money, bring it back, and we'll be successful. So these guys get this money together, like Sir Walter Raleigh did. They're going to get permission from the monarch of England. By this time, it's a king named James. He'd taken over for Queen Elizabeth, and they're going to ask King James, "Can we form this colony in your name? And as a sort of incentive for you, you're going to get a percentage of whatever we take back. So if we start pirating Spanish shipping, you'll get a cut of the silver we get. If we find gold mines, you'll get a cut of the gold mines." So the king is going to give his approval to it. He doesn't have anything to do with it. Same thing like Queen Elizabeth. She's not funding it. She doesn't have to worry about collecting money from Parliament to fund this. Same thing with King James. You guys take care of the funding. I just get to see the profit. Now, King James is going to basically say, I don't want any Catholics going because he's worried about maybe the Spanish eventually taking this over. He doesn't want anybody working against him, spying for Spain, and then seeing this thing destroyed really quickly. But if I get a percentage, you make sure it's only Protestants, you're good to go. So the joint stock company will start hiring some people to go to the New World, and they're going to start looking around for a place to set up their colony. Well, again, they want it somewhere close to Spanish so piracies logistically make sense, but not close enough to where the Spanish are going to stumble upon it before they have defenses built. So they're going to look around. They decide, of course, Roanoke, that one didn't work. But one thing they had noticed is that while the 600 tough dudes from Roanoke were messing around in this area, they had found this huge bay, and you'd actually had some English traders briefly stop in this bay, this Chesapeake Bay here, and the Virginia company's going to look and say, man, if we form a colony in this bay, Spanish aren't going to stumble upon it when they're cruising up and down the coast because you can't see smoke from the coast if you're on the outside of the bay. And they're thinking maybe this thing goes all the way across North America. Again, don't know exactly how big North America is. Think this could be the passage to Asia. So they say, let's build it in this Chesapeake Bay region. So again, roughly the same distance from Roanoke. Also, they're going to say the bay is generally going to have deeper waters, so it'll sort of prevent that the difficulty large ships had going in here from Roanoke. Again, that's you don't want the huge Spanish vessels going in there, but as we've seen, there are supply problems with Roanoke, so this Chesapeake Bay will solve that problem. So they're going to get 105 together, 105 guys together, and they're going to pick this Chesapeake Bay area to settle. 105 guys, they go to LinkedIn, they make their selection, and these guys will set off in 1607. People of Virginia Company, they're not going themselves. So they're funding it, they're hiring the people, they're putting together food for these guys to live off of until they can plant food, they can build the settlement, and they're going to be putting together trade goods for them to trade with local Indians, things like that. But they're just sending the 105 guys off. Well, these 105 guys arrive in Chesapeake Bay in 1607, and they're going to start cruising around the bay, and they're going to determine that this little inlet here off this James River, as it's going to come to be called, this is a good place to make a settlement because, again, it's away from the ocean, and it's deep enough to get our vessels into. And they're going to pick a place right here where there's no nearby Indians. Now, as we're going to talk about, these Palatines are adjacent to it, but on the immediate area they're going to pick, there are no local Indians. There's a reason for this. This area is not a good place for a settlement. So, one of the problems here is that it periodically can flood with seawater, so the ground is kind of salty. It's not perfect for growing crops. Another issue is tide. So, when the tide goes out, things are great because you're getting this fresh water from these rivers, flows down here, goes out to the sea. But when the tide comes in, you get salt water pushing back up to this area. So, not the best stuff for drinking, not the best stuff for watering your crops. Not only that, but like if you put refuse in the river, yay, it's going out when the tide goes out. But when it comes back here, oh, that's the waste I put in not too long ago. Here it is back again. So it's murky water. And the area is somewhat swampy. There's a lot of standing water in this region. It's sort of low to sea level, which makes it a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes and disease. Back then, they didn't know mosquitoes transfer disease. They just thought uh, stagnant water. They kind of made that connection. But these guys here do not. They build this Jamestown, or they disembark to build this Jamestown named after King James in a swampy area, a humid area, a place that's not perfect for growing crops. But the 105 guys that are picking this spot, they're probably not the best to be picking the spot anyway, because although the Virginia Company learned a lot from the failure of the Roanoke colony, they didn't learn as much as they probably should have in the hiring process. As a matter of fact, the 105 dudes that they pick, and it's just men that they're sending initially, they're trying to build the defenses up at this place in case Spain attacks. But the 105 guys they're going to pick are tough dudes yet again. And this is going to be a problem because when they disembark their ships, same thing's going to happen. All right, who here is a carpenter? Let's get to work on this fort. Not me. Where's our carpenters? All right, well, fine. We'll build this thing out of stone. Where's our stonemasons? Oh, all right. Well, where's our farmers? All right, we need to get food. We've only brought a certain amount of food, and we're going to run out really soon. Farmers, go ahead and step up here. Oh, no, we just brought tough dudes. They just brought adventurers. They actually brought things like jewelers in case or when they started getting the pirating stuff from Spain, or if they found a gold mine. They brought jewelers, but they didn't bring very qualified carpenters or farmers. Initially, this isn't going to be a huge issue because these guys did bring some supplies that they can trade with local Indians. And the local Indians are a group known as the Palatines. Actually, this is a initial depiction of the fort they're going to build. It's somewhat rudimentary. It's sort of a triangle fort. You see right here, Palatin is lifted. That's the chief of the Palatines. We'll talk about him in a second. So they land here, and the Palatines are not necessarily going to be surprised at seeing these guys. So the Palatines very quickly, there's about 20,000 Palatines in the region. They're under a single guy. So there's about a couple villages, 5-6 Palatine villages, couple thousand each. Palatines are sedentary agriculturalists. They live in these wooden houses. They live in these fields where they grow corn, beans, squash. Palatines making them rare is that they are under a single king, even though it's multiple towns. As we talked about, you don't see the empires like you'd see in Mesoamerica or parts of the Old World. But you do have a single king ruling over a number of these towns. Now, Palatines have neighbors they don't necessarily like. They'll engage in war with their neighbors, but they are these sedentary agriculturalists. Now, one thing we should point out with the Palatines is, again, they don't have domesticated animals outside of turkeys and dogs. So the Palatines do have a lot of area that they leave uncultivated. So we need deer for protein. So we're going to go ahead and leave this region as our hunting ground. But again, besides the hunting grounds, very similar to what you would see in England, France, Spain, very similar lifestyle. Again, not the same technology. And as we mentioned, they're not as advanced as Mississippi culture or Mesoamerica or Andes cultures, anything like that. But they are sedentary agriculturalists. Well, when the English show up, the Palatines are first going to question why they happen to move on this area that's terrible for growing crops. But they're not going to be surprised. Again, when these English show up in 1607, there'd been people trading up and down the coast of the Atlantic for 100 years. So, hey, it's these guys that come in and trade goods for a little while, then take off. We've been talking about it. These traders, these fishermen, they set up these temporary settlements and then they leave. So the Palatines may have seen some of these traders themselves, or if not, they've heard about these traders along the coast. And again, just a little bit to the southeast of them, some of these other Englishmen had set up in Roanoke. So the idea of these people showing up with cool stuff that just stay here for a little while and leave isn't that surprising. And so the Palatines think that's what these guys are doing when they settle here in Jamestown. They don't understand this is a permanent settlement. They just think these guys are coming here to trade, and they'll be leaving very, very soon. So the English settlers, they're having difficulty farming, but they have knives, pots, things like that the Palatines want. So they can conduct this trade with the Palatines, and Palatines going to provide them with food, and everything's going to be okay in 1607, at least for these first couple months, because the Englishmen have stuff to trade, and the Palatines have are willing traders. And again, they think these guys are just going to be here for a short amount of time. Not any animosity whatsoever. It just seems like a normal interaction you would have between these coastal traders and natives along the coast. All right. So this is the situation in Jamestown in 1607. Well, something's you wouldn't necessarily say friendly, but just a mutual partnership where they're both getting something beneficial. The Englishmen getting food, the Palatines getting European goods they can't produce themselves. Well, it's into this situation that we're going to see two individuals emerge that are going to come to sort of define the early colonial period in Jamestown. If you're asked to, say who comes to mind when you think of Jamestown, what two figures do people generally think of? I think of, and I think most people think of when they think of early Jamestown, I think of John Smith and Pocahontas. So this is a picture from the motion picture The New World, starring Colin Farrell. This actress, I don't know her name. She's been in a couple movies, but these two actors are good-looking people. Man, these people look really good. This is so if you were to look at this, if you're looking at the Disney cartoon, those people look good looking. Man, John Smith, handsome fella. Pocahontas, incredibly beautiful. Awesome. So these two people in colonial Virginia are going to be these attractive, handsome people like this. Well, John Smith and Pocahontas did not look like this. And as a matter of fact, the Disney cartoon gets a lot wrong. This movie gets a lot wrong. And one of the things they get wrong is that John Smith and Pocahontas, in reality, probably looked more like this. Kind of gross, all right? These are not the handsome people. These are not Colin Farrell. This is not this beautiful actress. This is weird, hairy man and sort of alien-looking woman here. These are actually depictions of the time of these two individuals, and they don't look as attractive as this. As a matter of fact, John Smith, people said he was short and hairy and just weird looking. Pocahontas, she may have been attractive. This portrait was done by an English artist, and they sort of tried to over-accentuate her Indian features, and whatever came out as a result of that kind of makes her look a little bit differently, and she probably was in reality. But for the sake of talking here, let's just look at these guys and pretend they're John Smith and Pocahontas, all right? So one myth we sort of have about John Smith and Pocahontas is that they're good-looking people when in reality they weren't. We also have other myths about John Smith and Pocahontas that weren't true. One of the things you'll see, and you see it in this New World movie, you also see it in the Disney cartoon, is that John Smith met Pocahontas through this violent encounter between Pocahontas' father, who was the chief of the Palatines, Chief Palatin is his name, and John Smith. If you watch the movies, basically John Smith is out on a foraging expedition. He is captured by Palatines. He's brought to the chief's main house. The chief and this dark ceremony with this fire and smoke billowing everywhere, and a crowd surrounded by Palatines. orders John Smith to be killed, and John Smith's about to get his head bashed in by a Palatine on orders from Chief Palatine. But according to Disney, according to just about every John Smith Pocahontas story, at the last second, Pocahontas steps in and saves John Smith and says, "No, father, don't. I love this man." And then these guys live happily ever after, and we have a Disney cartoon ensue. This isn't true either, okay? So, what we think happens is that John Smith is on a foraging expedition. So, John Smith is one of the 105 men from the sent by the Virginia Company. They're trading peacefully with the Palatines, but at one point, John Smith sets out to either establish new trade with groups other than the Palatines, so past where the Palatine villages are, or to trade with Palatine villages further off. And what we think happens is that John Smith is going to be brought in by Chief Palatine not to kill him, not something like this, but what we think happens is that Chief Palatine orders John Smith in because he wants to conduct a kinship ceremony with him. So here's something that people forget a lot when they're talking about these early interactions between the English and the various Indians along the Atlantic coast. If you introduce European goods, firearms, steel weapons, that's going to cause a power imbalance. All right. So if one tribe gets firearms, steel weapons, and one tribe does not, the tribe with those weapons is going to defeat the other one. Well, Chief Palatine, what we think happens is he sees John Smith heading out, and he's worried that he's going to start trading with a group other than the Palatines. So we think he brings him in to basically make John Smith a brother, like, because he only wants him to trade with the Palatines, doesn't want him to trade with somebody else, because if he trades with somebody else, then that could prevent the Palatines from being the big dogs in the area. So, and we think this because there are other accounts of the Palatines doing this and basically incorporating people in their tribe through this weird ceremony with the smoke and the fire in this house surrounded by Palatines. So we don't think that John Smith was brought in to be killed, and it doesn't really make sense that he would be killed because if the English learned that the Palatines killed one of them, they're probably not going to trade with them anymore. And the Palatines don't want that. They want to be the exclusive trading partner of the English. They don't want them trading with anybody else. They certainly would if the Palatines were killing Englishmen left and right. So we think that John Smith probably confused that part, all right, or he may have exaggerated. And we say exaggerated because we know John Smith's story not from the time. He didn't write it down at the time. He's going to write an autobiography 15 years later or so about his time in Virginia and actually about his whole life. And he includes a number of exaggerated stories. And we think that the fact where Pocahontas steps in at the last second before he's about to be killed, we think that's exaggerated as well. We don't think she saved his life again because we don't think his life was under threat. And not only that, but this is one of 4 different instances in John Smith's autobiography where he's saved from death at the last second by a beautiful woman. As a matter of fact, there's one account where John Smith is in Turkey, and a sultan has caught him, I don't know, legally trading or something like that, and the sultan is about to order one of his guards to chop John Smith's head off with like a scimitar or something like that, and as he's about to bring it down, the sultan's daughter jumps in and saves John Smith at the last second and says, "Father, please don't kill him." So either John Smith is incredibly fortunate to have beautiful women step in, and at least in 2 instances, 2 beautiful princesses step in when their father's about to have them killed, or he's making stuff up. So we kind of lean on the side of he's probably just playing things up for an audience. So that part of the Disney thing isn't true. Another sort of aspect of the John Smith Pocahontas myth that isn't true is the fact these guys probably didn't have a relationship, or at least a sexual relationship, or a more than friends relationship, okay? And we think that because when John Smith meets Pocahontas, she's probably about 11. John Smith would be, late 20s, early 30s, something like that. That's a pretty sizable age difference, and even though people married younger back then, you don't marry somebody prepubescent. That's never was that okay. So that's not even back then. That's not something people did. So we don't think it happened for that reason, and there's no indication in any of the surviving documents that that happened either. What we think happened is that John Smith, after this kinship ceremony, he's going to spend some time with the Palatines away from the fort. So he's captured on this foraging expedition or trading expedition, spend some time with the Palatines. During this time, he's going to find that this 11-year-old girl, Pocahontas, chief's daughter, is incredibly curious about these weird people. Again, weird people with white faces, beards, different style of clothing, different technology than they have. And she starts asking him questions. He starts asking her questions. And because she's at the age where it's really easy to pick up a second language, Pocahontas starts to learn a lot of English, and John Smith, because he's spending time only around Palatines, starts to pick up a little bit of the Palatine language, and they're going to develop a friendship. And we know that they're going to have this friendship because John Smith, after spending some time with the Palatines, will return with Pocahontas to Jamestown, and through their connection, Pocahontas will start encouraging her father and encouraging the Palatine people to help these Jamestown settlers. So going into 1607 into 1608, we actually see this close friendship between the Palatines and the English. And even when the English, their trading goods start to run low, the Palatines are going to be giving them favorable trade terms. So, all right, maybe we could force these guys to get 2 hatchets for a bushel of corn, maybe because they seem to be on the same page with us and they're friends with Pocahontas. We'll give them 1 bushel of corn for 1 hatchet or something like that. So through their friendship, this Jamestown settlement, which may have died without the support of the Palatines or without this close relationship, may have died out, but their friendship's going to allow Jamestown to survive. And as a matter of fact, because of this friendship, John Smith's actually going to raise himself to become the leader of the Jamestown settlement. A different guy was in charge before him, but now, hey, this guy brought in these friendly Indians and is getting us good trade deals. So he becomes head of Jamestown. And what happens in 1608 is the 105 guys actually start to thrive. The Palatines teach them how to grow their own corn and beans and squash, and they actually have a successful harvest in 1608. John Smith, I don't want to portray it as being absolutely perfect with the Palatines. There's some disagreement, but for the most part, he gets his guys working, gets them to build the fort, gets them to plant the corn, keeps it in order there, and maintains, for the most part, very friendly relations with the Palatines. And in going into 1609, it seems like things are going well. It seems like things are going well, and this is going to be a successful settlement. We're going to start having pirate ships show up, and the Virginia Company will start making money off their initial investment. Well, it's at this point in 1609, so the guys have been here for a year and a half or something, or so, that something will happen to John Smith. This something is he's going to have an accident. Basically, back then, the English carried around these pistols and these rifles that would be loaded with black powder. It's not like the guns we have today where the explosives are in the bullet itself. Instead, the way you would load these guns is you would put this black powder down in, you would pack a ball down there, and you would fire that weapon that way. So you would carry this black powder around your pouch, explosive, flammable. Well, John Smith is walking around. Somehow his pouch gets lit on fire, explodes, takes out a chunk of his leg. So in 1609, he's severely injured and he needs to go back to England for medical treatment. Well, fortunately for him, right after his injury, a ship from England, from the Virginia Company, carrying additional supplies and some new settlers. This is going to bring the population up to 214 in Jamestown, so a little bit more than 100 settlers will be arriving. Well, John Smith is going to get on the vessel that brought them. He's going to go back to England. So he's only there for the first year and a half, and then he's going to take off. All right, so John Smith's no longer there to maintain the close friendship with the Palatines. He's no longer there to get the people of Jamestown working. And we're going to see almost immediately this is going to be a problem because now you have a bigger population, but you also have a population that isn't working as hard because John Smith's not around. And I should point out the additional 100 or so settlers is going to include women and children. The Virginia Company basically said the first guys set everything up. We want the colony to grow, the population to grow. So that means children, women, things like that. We need people giving birth. So the second group to arrive includes women and children. So John Smith leaves. Without him, we're going to see a lot of those people that were unwilling to farm, unwilling to build. They sort of start slacking off. The guy that replaces John Smith's not as good as John Smith. And again, you have this new group bringing new supplies, but you've doubled the population. So they're going to quickly go through their supplies, including and go through the food that they grow around the fort, and they're going to consume this food, and they're going to actually start going very quickly through supplies. They're going to start trading it with the Palatines, again, not getting as good of deals as they would have under John Smith. And the Palatines are going to trade them some food, but it's going to get to the point where the Palatines, I can't support you anymore. I don't want to trade. The value of the goods isn't going to be as much as more goods keep coming in. So basically, the Palatines are going to stop trading with these guys. So the 214 settlers in Jamestown start to run out of food in the winter of 1609. There's just not enough to go around. So this winter of 1609 to 1610, which some historians call the starving time, they actually call it starving time at the time, people will start starving to death. And what you see in Jamestown is this winter where people start, not enough food, so they start starving. Well, the leaders of Jamestown, they're going to decide, all right, our people are dying. The Palatines don't seem willing to trade to us. So some people will decide we're going to go ahead and take from the Palatines instead. And these expeditions will be sent out to go attack these Palatine villages and steal their foods. Well, some of the expeditions will successfully steal the food, but almost immediately the Palatines are going to see what's going on, and they're going to basically take up around Jamestown, almost set up like a siege around Jamestown. And when another expedition sent out to get food, basically the Palatines, second they're outside of Jamestown, will seize these guys and kill them. As a matter of fact, there's a story about how some of the Jamestown settlers set out on this expedition after stealing from the Palatines. The Palatines capture them the next time around, and they're going to string their bodies up on like these crosses, like almost like these makeshift crucifixes, and kill them, and then take some corn and shove them in the mouths of the bodies, and basically say to the Jamestown settlers, you want food, here's food. So in a course of a year after John Smith's gone, or less than a year, you've now upset the Palatines by stealing from them. You've run out of food because you hadn't been producing as much food, and the Palatines aren't trading as much to you. And again, now they're your enemies. So people are starving. And what you're going to see happen in Jamestown is something that we actually thought until recently may be exaggerated. But there's going to be stories where people start eating humans, all right? First, they'll start eating things like leather. They'll start chopping up, boots, stuff like that to eat. They'll find rats that are scurrying around the fort. They'll eat those. But that's only going to go so far. Well, people start starving to death, and what will happen is they'll bury them during the day, and then at night, everybody will show up. At least some people will show up, dig up the body, start eating it, cracking open bone marrow and stuff like that. So people start eating the dead. And it's actually going to get to the point where some people will kill other people for the purpose of eating them. There's one story that comes out of Jamestown where a man, his wife, he and his wife had arrived on the second vessel. They're in bed. The man starts having this starvation dreams, kills his wife, and then basically eats her. And then he will later everybody discovers what he's done. He's later hung from his fingers to die, like they hang him from his fingers and execute him. And then supposedly his body got eaten as well. Now, these stories, a lot of people thought they were sort of exaggerated. Maybe the eating the boots thing happened, but this cannibalism probably didn't happen. That was until we did these excavations. Really, I think it was a couple years ago. And what they discovered was stuff like this. So what this is right here is a skull of a teenage boy, and what these marks are, we think, is they are marks where the boy died or was killed, and this is somebody cutting into his hair to get the meat under the hair, perhaps maybe even get into the brain area to eat it. And so these are these marks where this happened. So it's true. People started eating each other, and by the end of this winter of 1609, 1610, so when spring hits in 1610, we're going to have out of the 214 settlers, 154 of them had died. So only 60 are going to be left in spring 1610. Well, these settlers are going to determine, I want to get the hell out of here. This is too much. We're going to die if we stay here. They're going to pack up their stuff, the survivors are, and they're going to start walking back to the coast. So let's see right here. Let's get the right here. So this is where Jamestown, the survivors are going to pack everything they can, start heading in this direction, and their plan is going to be to weigh down the first ship they see. Hey, we know if the Spanish catch us, we're probably going to end up in prison. They might execute us. It's better than staying here where we're going to starve, or maybe eventually the Palatines will attack us and kill us. So let's just go ahead and get out of here. Perfect case scenario, an English vessel or maybe a French vessel or something picks us up, takes us back to England. But even if it's a Spanish vessel, it's better than eating people if we stay here. So these guys are going to take off towards the coast. Right when they're reaching the coast, there happens to be another resupply ship coming from the Virginia Company. So these guys are going to be pulling in 1610, spring 1610, and they're going to see these almost like skeleton-like figures walking on the coast, like trying to wave them down. And they're going to be like, what the hell happened to these guys? What the hell's wrong with them? Well, the survivors are going to weigh these guys down. The incoming ship will learn what's happened and basically say, all right, why don't you give this another shot? We understand you're starving, but hey, we brought food with us. We brought resupplies with us. Let's give it another go. And so these 60 will return with these additional settlers, and they're going to try to make Jamestown work now that they have these resupply vessel with them. Well, the newcomers, they are going to bring food, and we're going to see people are going to become healthier, but they're actually bringing something and someone that is going to completely turn around, I shouldn't say completely, but substantially turn around the fortunes of Jamestown. They're bringing along with them a guy named Batman, Christian Bale. No, it's not Christian Bale, but Christian Bale obviously played Batman. This is Christian Bale playing a guy named John Rolfe. So the guy that's going to arrive with the resupply vessel in 1610 is named John Rolfe. We don't have a depiction of him from the time. That's why I stuck Christian Bale from New World up here. But John Rolfe is arriving. He's one of the resupply vessels. And John Rolfe is bringing with him something that is going to make the Jamestown colony work. And it's not anything to do with piracy. So that's why Jamestown was settled. But John Rolfe's going to have something very different than piracy. What he has with him is tobacco seeds. All right? So the Spanish had been growing tobacco in the Caribbean since shortly after Columbus arrived. They'd found this plant that if you dry it and you smoke it, it gives this buzz, this intoxication, and it's very addicting. The Spanish had been selling this back to Spain and Europe for the past 100 years. It hadn't really made its way to England because the English and Spanish aren't on the best of terms. And again, the English don't have anywhere to grow it prior to this point because they're not settled in the New World and it doesn't grow well in English soil. So John Rolfe is going to bring tobacco. Now, I should point out tobacco, there is some native tobacco to Virginia, but this stuff isn't very good. It's not smooth. It doesn't, have the sweet, sweet taste of cigarettes or whatever you would get from those old-timey advertisements. The stuff John Rolfe is bringing actually does. So John Rolfe, prior to joining the 1610 expedition, he'd actually illegally traded with the Spanish in the Caribbean, which you're not supposed to do. And he'd gotten from the Spanish some of these Caribbean tobacco seeds, and he's going to bring them to Jamestown. And when he gets there, the English are going to start scattering a couple of these, particularly John Rolfe. He's going to scatter a couple of these outside the fort, and he's going to discover these things grow like wildfire. They're going to start growing rapidly, and with very little care. So when he produces these, he's going to end up drying some of them, sending a couple shipments back to the Virginia Company back in England. And very quickly, what's going to happen is the Virginia Company will start selling this, to elites around England. They're going to start getting addicted, and they're going to start saying to their settlers, hey, forget the piracy thing, or at least set that on the side. Why don't we focus on growing this? And what you'll see very quickly in the 16 teens is Virginia is going to start growing from outside of the fort, and we'll see these people start creating these fields, clearing these forests to grow tobacco because it becomes so profitable. So very quickly, the fortunes of the colony are going to get turned around. Not for piracy or what it was originally founded for, nothing to do with the passage to Asia, nothing to do with gold mines, but because of this addictive plant. Again, John Rolfe starts sending it back 1611, 1612. By 1615, everybody in Jamestown is just about everybody is growing tobacco, and they're sending it back to the Virginia Company. Virginia Company's taking their cut, sending some profits back to them. I should point out that as we're going to talk about, the Palatines are seeing these settlers arrive, additional settlers. They're not necessarily going to be upset whenever there's new arrivals, in particular because when they come, they're bringing new stuff. So like the Palatines, all right, all the English didn't die out in 1610. These new people arrived. Well, they have new hatchets, new pots, new things like that. So this is more stuff to trade with them. And what you'll see during the 16 teens is like this on and off friendship between the Palatines and the settlers of Jamestown. So for a couple months or maybe a couple years, the Palatines will be friendly with the English. You've got stuff to trade. Well, the English do something to upset them. Now we're at war. Now we're at peace. Now we're at war. It's this on and off warfare. And this is actually going to bring us sort of to the end of John Smith and Pocahontas' story, because during one of these periods of warfare, or peace and warfare, Pocahontas is going to be captured by the English. So whenever the Palatines were at peace with the English, Pocahontas would visit the English village. She's learning English pretty well. She would facilitate trade, but during times of war, she'd go back with her father. Well, one time, she's there trading with the English. The English, basically, there had been a dispute with the Palatines. They realize a war's about to come. They're going to take Pocahontas, kidnap her, and what their hope is basically to get concessions from Chief Powhatan. Basically, if you, I can't remember exactly what the terms were at that point, but like if you give us some land, or you recognize our title to here, or you quit your attacks here, you give us food or whatever here, then we'll bring back your daughter, or we'll give you back your daughter. So they take her captive. Well, Chief Powhatan, he's got like 20 wives. He's got like 200 kids. So when they do this, he's like, I got more kids. And basically says, keep her. So they plan to keep Pocahontas as a hostage. It doesn't work. The king doesn't, fight for her back, or doesn't trade anything to get her back. And so Pocahontas, she's going to get mad at her father. She's going to decide to stay with the English even after the conflict ended. And she's going to learn English even better than she had before. She's going to start dressing English. She's going to start learning Christianity. The colonists will call her Rebecca instead of Pocahontas. And so she basically acculturates herself to the English. And at one point, she'll actually marry John Rolfe. So after John Smith leaves, Pocahontas doesn't see him anymore. Rolfe is going to be there. He and Pocahontas will marry. Again, by the time by the time this happens, Pocahontas is in her mid-late teens, which again back then was sort of traditional marrying age. And they're the two that get married. And as a matter of fact, Pocahontas at one point, her and John Rolfe, they have a child, and the three of them go back to England. That's when this portrait was drawn of Pocahontas. We don't know exactly where she went in England, but there's some reports that she got to meet the King of England, King James, spent some time among the royal court, and she was sort of exhibited as this Indian princess. Look, this is the daughter of this Chief Powhatan, and she's showed around England, which is another thing that's untrue about the Disney one. I think in the Disney one, John Smith and Pocahontas end up together. That's not the case. John Rolfe and Pocahontas end up together. They go back to England. Unfortunately for Pocahontas, this disease thing is going to come in again. American Indians don't have these immunities to certain European diseases. Pocahontas is going to get there to England. She's going to catch some sort of disease, and she's going to die in England. Now, John Rolfe and her son will return to Virginia, and they're going to continue planting tobacco, things like that. So some people today can claim ancestry to Pocahontas through the son, of Pocahontas, but she herself, she's going to die when she's in England. So Disney's story didn't happen there. And again, John Smith, he goes off and does his own thing. He never sees Pocahontas again. All right, so this is the situation in Jamestown. The Virginia Company, it's not, when the tobacco starts to be grown, the Virginia Company starts to make some money. Now, I shouldn't say make money because they'd gone heavily into debt to finance these various expeditions. So they'd put a lot of money into hiring the initial colonists. They put a lot of money into sending supplies, sending food over. So they're still in debt, but this percentage of the tobacco they're taking is starting to get them money in return, getting money in return. So they're starting to pay off their debt. Well, something's going to happen that's going to basically they're going to have an issue getting people over there to grow this tobacco. And you can imagine when people start returning with stories of people eating each other, Palatine attacks, things like that, that you would have a problem getting new settlers. So what we'll see beginning in the 16 teens is the Virginia Company will start putting incentives into growing Jamestown. One thing they're going to do is they're going to establish in 1619 something called the House of Burgesses. So the Virginia Company, just wealthy dudes back in England, basically they've been sending rules for this Jamestown and this Virginia colony is what they call the whole settlement over there. You guys need to do this. You guys need to do this. Well, after a while they realize we don't know the situation as well as the people over there, so why don't we just let them make the day-to-day decisions? They can determine how to handle the Palatines. They can determine where to plant the crops, things like that. We're just going to let them make the decisions. We'll just collect the profits. So in 1619, this House of Burgesses is going to be established, and what this will be is prominent colonists in Virginia. So, these Englishmen that came over, if you've got property, if you're, one of these people that is making a lot of money, you can basically be elected by the colonists at Virginia, and this is only going to be men, but you can be elected, and you serve on the House of Burgesses, and when you start serving on the House of Burgesses, you help make the decisions for the colonies, not the Virginia Company. They're just going to be profiting from this thing. And the way that Virginia Company looks at this is if word gets out here in England about this, that you can go over to this new place and you can start making a little bit of cash, and then you can not only do that, but you can also serve in the government. That's going to get a lot of people over there. So the Virginia Company will start this House of Burgesses. It's this representative body that will start making decisions for Jamestown, and other settlements are going to start popping up outside of Jamestown. Another thing the Virginia Company is going to do is it's going to start to offer land for free to anybody that can pay for their passage over here to Virginia. So again, the Virginia Company, we need this tobacco coming in. Basically, the king had given us permission to settle this Virginia area, but we're not having enough people over there. So the Virginia Company will say any land that's not occupied by Indians, we're going to go ahead and assume that's English land. So this chunk of territory right here, we'll give it away to you if you come over. We'll give you X amount of land if you're single. We'll give you a little bit more land if you're married and there's kids, things like that. So they start offering this as an incentive to get people over there. They're also going to, by the way, to make money back, they're actually going to start selling huge chunks of lands to companies in England. So, hey, we got to pay back our debt. The king gave us permission to settle anywhere in this area. Well, we're not using this chunk of land, we're just using it around the James River. So why don't a company over here buy this chunk of land, this chunk of our colonial charter is what they call it. That's with permission to settle in this new world. And so they'll start selling off huge swaths of lands to various companies to get some return on investment. So they're incentivizing going over there with the House of Burgesses, free land, and they're selling chunks of their charter to other people. All right, so 16, 18, 16, 19, through these methods, we'll see more and more English start showing up in the New World, and new settlements will start popping up outside of Jamestown. So if you look here, these are some of the first English settlements. We got Smith's Hundred, whatever this is, Flowerdew Hundred, Martin's Brandon. That's a really weird name for a town. But these are gonna be these settlements that are established in the years after Jamestown's founded, and we'll have it all up and down this James River. Well, as these guys start to expand, this is going to end up upsetting the Palatines. And this is going to upset the Palatines not because the English are settling directly on their land, because the English settlers are actually very careful not to, if there's an Indian village over here, they basically say, we're not going to settle there. If they have their crops here, we're not going to settle there. The way the English are going to look is the Palatines here, 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 here. They have their land, we have our land. Don't settle around here because this is where they have their crops, this is where their houses are. That's their land. They're sort of understanding it how land is apportioned in England. But since the Palatines aren't over here, there's no crops over here, we can settle over here, this looks like it's up for grabs. What the English are failing to understand is that the Palatines have reserved a lot of land as hunting grounds. So the English, they have livestock. Back in England, you get your protein from pigs, cows, sheep. So what you do is you have certain land that you fence off and you devote for your pastoral animals, cows, sheep, stuff like that. And that's where you get your protein. The people of the New World have never had that, or at least since way back when those type of animals had gone extinct. So instead of having pasture land, they just leave certain areas undeveloped. So when the English settle in this area, they're thinking they're settling an area that the Indians don't use, but in reality they use it as their hunting ground. So when the English start going in here, clearing off the land, planting tobacco, planting their own food crops, they're essentially going to be driving off these deer, other rabbits, other animals that the local Palatines have been using for food. And so English expansion will start cutting into Palatine calories. And by the way, the English will start letting out some of their cows and pigs, and some of these animals will start getting into the Palatines' crops, food crops, eating that. So think about late 16 teens, early 1620s, the Palatines are starting to see their calories reduced by the English, and this is obviously going to upset them. You're taking our hunting grounds, you're taking our food. And the Palatines, at this point, by 1622, they basically realize these guys are not going away. Initially they thought they were just going to be here for a little while, but obviously, time goes on. They realize these guys are staying. Not only are they staying, they're growing in number, and they're starting to impede on our hunting ground. And actually, by 1622, there's over 1,000 English here along this James River. Well, the Palatines are going to decide, we've got to get rid of these guys. We've got to get rid of them now. We've gone through this period where we're friendly then enemies. We've got to go ahead and get rid of them. And so in 1622, the English and the Palatines are actually at peace with one another. They've been peacefully trading. But the Palatine chief, it's actually Chief Palatine's brother by this point. Chief Palatine had died, which is of disease, which is another thing that the Palatines start to see is the introduction of disease. We don't know if disease had made its way up from DeSoto or Florida yet at this point, but now they're starting to see disease introduced by the English. So they're going to determine we've got to get these guys out of here. So because they're at peace, the Palatines are going to send to all these various English settlements at the same day, at the same time, warriors sort of disguised as traders. They're going to be carrying furs, to indicate that we're showing up and we're just coming here to get pots and hatchets, things like that. But they're going to show up in these various settlements all at the same time, and you can just imagine, Palatine Bob or whatever, he's coming in, and you see English Steve over there, and Palatine Bob says, "Hey, I got some stuff to trade." English Steve, "Hey, cool. What's that you're pulling out of the out of your pile of furs?" Hatchet time to English Steve's head. The Palatines are going to conduct this huge massacre where they're going to kill some 300 to 350 English settlers in one fell swoop. And the intention here is to drive the English away. Basically, what the Palatine thinks is going to happen is we're going to kill as many of these guys as possible. The survivors are then going to run and go back to England. And the way the Palatines thought we don't have to kill all of them is because whenever the Palatines went to war with their neighbors, if you kill a number of the neighbors, generally the rest are going to flee. That's what they thought was going to happen here. We kill a third of them, the rest of them are going to run away. So the Palatines kill a number of the English. Some of the English are going to huddle together sort of at the centers of their various towns, fight the Palatines off. Some are going to take to the boats, be able to survive that way. But they're not going to, once the English, the survivors, they're not going to do what the Palatines thought and run away. Instead, what they're going to do is they are going to retaliate against the Palatines in massive numbers, all right? So the Palatines thought we attack them, they run away. That's not what's going to happen. The survivors are basically going to get every adult male, I should say adult, like some 12-year-old, any male capable of carrying a weapon, they're going to arm, and they're going to conduct this massive retaliation against the Palatines. So whereas the Palatines killed 350 people, the English are going to get together, use their technological advantage, and completely wipe out certain Palatine villages. So these militias, which is what you call just armed civilians that create these armies, will wipe out the Palatine village here. They're going to start attacking, wiping out other Palatine villages, and they're going to essentially conduct or kill 10 Palatines for every one Englishman killed. So just massive retaliation. So we're going to see this throughout Virginia after this 1622 massacre. Well, the Palatines are initially going to try to sue for peace. They're basically going to say, "Hey, we'd like peace. Don't kill us anymore." They don't have the even though they have a lot more numbers than the English, they don't have the weapons the English do. The English initially say, "Sure, we'll settle for peace." They invite the Palatines to meet with them, but then they're going to poison 200 Palatines' drinks, kill additional 200 more. It's only at that point will they accept the Palatines' peace offer, and what they're going to do is they're going to force the Palatines to abandon a number of their villages and essentially move west and recognize English control to a huge swath of land. So this massacre of 1622 was intended to drive the English away from Virginia, but it's actually going to, in the end, the English retaliation will force the Palatines to move west. So it basically opens up a lot of new land for the English settlers. They tell the Palatines, "Sign this treaty, you're moving over here west, this land is now ours." We'll actually see this pattern continue throughout English America. Whenever Indians attack, you retaliate 10 to 1, and then as a condition of peace, you force them to sign over a huge chunk of land to you. So this is going to basically open all this land for English settlement. And again, additional or English settlers past this point, and then you can even carry it over to the American period. This is going to be sort of the MO. If you get attacked, you attack them tenfold. So that's going to be a big result of this massacre of 1622. Another thing is going to be a result of this is by 1622, the Virginia Company is still making money off this. They still had gotten permission of the king to extract this wealth. Well, after this massacre of 1622, the King of England is going to look over here and say, "What the hell's going on over here, you guys? I heard you guys were eating each other. We didn't talk about diseases had run through this area." But with the massacre of 1622, essentially 7 out of 8 Englishmen that had gone to the New World had died up to this point. And so the king is going to say, "You guys don't know what you're doing over there. You don't know how to run things." And so in 1624, the king is basically going to take away the Virginia Company's charter and take away their permission to settle over here. And so the Virginia Company will basically be kaput. And this is at the point where they still had not paid off the debt they had used accumulated to create this colony. So the Virginia Company never actually makes money here. They started making money with tobacco, but the king rescinds their permission from this point forward. And instead, what the king is going to do is he's going to say, now I'm in charge. You're no longer in charge of running this thing. He's going to appoint a governor, and as we're going to see, this governor is going to go over to the New World, and he's going to be the one in charge of running things. But as we're going to talk about later, what this governor is quickly going to find is if I let the House of Burgesses make the decision for the colony, that's going to be a lot easier. But just know from this point forward, the Virginia colony will become a royal colony. The king's now going to be in charge of things, okay? So this is the fate of Virginia. Now we have a royal colony, and it's a royal colony with a lot of open land. What we're going to see very soon is that the governor, along with the House of Burgesses, is going to keep that Virginia Company's policy of allowing free land to any settler that can come over here. So the English are going to continue to pour into this area where there's a lot of available land, but not a lot of available labor. So the expulsion of the Palatines opens up a ton of new land. And I should point out, the Palatines are sort of the first American Indian group to be pushed out by the English in the Virginia area. This is going to keep happening and keep happening and keep happening. And basically this is going to leave the English with a ton of land, more land than people to work the land. All right, so all of this land is going to lead to a labor issue. Well, if the situation was like it was back in England, there's tons of labor back in England. The way it worked back there, you kind of had this feudal system, but a lot of the ways things would operate is that somebody needs to get something done, they hire somebody to work for them. So you need a job, you can't do the job yourself, you pay somebody to do the job for you. So if this was back in England and you had somebody with land and they couldn't work it themselves, then basically they'd hire somebody else, or they'd let somebody work their land, take a percentage of their crop. They'd get free labor. So I can't work these 100 acres. Bill, I'm hiring you. You're going to work for me. I'll work this 50 acres. You work this 50 acres over here, and we get the crops picked. All right. Well, that's not going to be able to happen here in the New World, and the reason for this is because just about everybody that comes to the New World is going to be able to get their hands on land. And this is going to owe initially to the Virginia Company's policy of you get over here, you pay for your passage, you get free land the second you arrive. And again, the royal, once Virginia becomes a royal colony, they're going to keep up the same thing. You come here, you get a percentage of land. One person gets X amount of land. You bring family, you get a little bit more land. So if you are Bill, let's say maybe you get 100 acres when you show up in Virginia. You get 100 acres right here. You and your family are able to work this 100 acres. But then let's say your neighbor dies in the massacre of 1622, and maybe he deeds you 100 acres next door. Maybe the other neighbor, he dies as well. He deeds you his land because, hey, you're my neighbor, I'm going to give you some land. Now you find yourself with 300 acres, and maybe somebody decides, I'm done with this. I'm tired of people getting massacred. I'm tired of disease. I'm going to head back to England. I'll sell you my 100 acres for 10 pence or whatever the heck English currency they're using at the time. And I'll give you 10 pounds or whatever. You get this land. Now you have 500 acres. Well, you and your family can only work 100 at a time. So you got this 400 acres. You want to work it. What are you going to do with it? Well, what we'll see is people will try to hire around the Virginia colony, but again, nobody's going to want to work your land because they get over here, they get their own land. So you try to hire this guy, come here, work this 100 acres for me. Why would I do that when I have my own 100 acres? Everybody gets their own acreage because they show up and they can acquire land very easily. So why would you work for somebody else for a wage when you can work for yourself, keep all of the profit? So how are these English settlers going to find somebody to work? How specifically are the people that have accumulated a lot of land, which is going to be a lot of these early English colonials in Virginia, how are they going to find somebody to work for them? Well, what we'll see is some Englishmen will look to indentured servitude, and this is going to become a big source of labor in the 1600s in Virginia, and then later on we get other English colonies in the South, those colonies as well. And it's going to extend into the 1700s as well. So, what is indentured servitude? Well, let's say you have somebody in England who's born poor. The vast majority of people in England uh, don't have money, they don't have land, they don't have property, born to a poor family. And the way things are in England, if you don't have land, you're going to be working. You're not going to be able to get an education. You're working from childhood, not able to get an education. You're probably going to die poor. There's very little economic and social mobility in England. So if you're born poor, you're probably going to die poor. Well, some people in Virginia will realize, hey, land's in abundance here. Again, they're giving it out for free if you get over here. Why don't I send a recruiter back to England and appeal to this poor population, and then later when England expands into Scotland and Ireland, we'll see these recruiters go to those areas as well, and you'll see people commission uh, working class, the poor in England, to sign contracts for a passage to the New World. So you'll find somebody in a city, you go to London, you find some paupers, and basically you say, if you come work with me for 7 years, I'll pay for your passage to the New World. By coming to the New World, you're going to get some property. Now, this guy would not be able to afford passage to the New World himself. It's simply too expensive for the vast majority of poor people in England to afford to get to the New World. These ships are really expensive. It's more than a plane ticket. So you're giving him the opportunity to come to the New World and acquire land, which he almost certainly wouldn't have been able to do in England, where it's land poor. There's simply a small area and there's a lot of people. So you come over, work for me. I get to order you around for whatever the terms of the contract, 5, 6, 7 years. But at the end of it, you're released from your contract, and by nature, come in the New World, you get your own land. So a lot of indentures will take up the terms of these contracts. Now, some will be limited because some people will say, I'd rather be poor than go over there and possibly be killed by disease, Indians, starvation, that type of thing. But some people are willing to take that chance, just looking for an opportunity to better themselves. So we're going to see these indentured servants come over. And in addition to this, we'll see some Virginia planters will commission convicts. So the British would arrest people for just about anything. If you didn't work in Britain, vagrancy, that was considered a crime. You could get locked in a prison. And basically, a lot of people from Virginia would basically say, hey, I'll buy the terms of this person's incarceration. They come serve work for me for a period of time. And when they're done, when their imprisonment's over, they'll be released. So you'd see them sometimes bring these convicts over and have them work for them. And by the way, sometimes the position or the convicts coming over, they'd get land upon release as well. All right, so this indentured servitude, to a lesser extent, this convict labor, maybe this is the solution to this labor. Well, it is in some regards. Okay, we're going to see indentured servitude again going to be a major source of labor in Virginia and other English colonies for a long time, but these indentures aren't going to be the perfect laborers for these guys with this surplus of land. At least they're going to find issues with these indentures. Some are going to have problems because they don't know how to plant. A lot of these people are coming from poor families and cities. Some are coming from Scotland and Ireland, where farming's a thing, but it's not like in most areas of England where it's people grow wheat, that type of thing. Ireland, Scotland, they're pastoral cultures, meaning they raise sheep, cows. They get over here. You hire this Scottish indentured. He comes for 7 years, and he gets over. I've never grown stuff before. I raise sheep. All right, well, got to take time teaching them. I just paid this guy, I'm making up this number, £100 to get over here. Now I got to spend some time out of his contract teaching him how to plant. That's some time here. That's going to be a little bit difficult. Another issue for people bringing indentures is that indentures can get out of their contract before it's over. Better than you're going to see other forms of labor get out of their contract. So what will happen is you have an indentured come from England, Ireland, Scotland, particularly England. They come over, and this master in his indentured, the indenture's under contract for 7 years. Well, the master doesn't think he's working enough. maybe he physically abuses him or something like that. Or maybe the indenture determines this guy's not providing with proper food. He's violating his contract because the contract says for the period of 7 years, I'm working for this guy, but he's got to provide me with shelter and food. But he's sticking me in the barn, which I don't think is proper shelter. He's not feeding me enough. Well, what these indentures can do as subjects of the crown, so if you're born in England, and then later when England acquires Scotland, parts of Ireland, you're supposed to be beholden to the king. What you can then do is, if you have a grievance, you can bring this to a court. Now, the House of Burgesses is going to set up these courts for Virginia, and basically you can bring complaints over. Bring complaints over, property, that type of thing. Well, indentures can go to these courts and say, this guy's violating his terms of the contract. Sometimes the judges will agree, hey, you're not fulfilling your end of the bargain, and they'll release indentures from their contract. And so you've got, again, you paid for this guy's passage, but you'd never made the money back what you paid for him to get over. We're going to see others, indentures, simply run away before the end of their contract. Now, we're just talking about Virginia now, but spoiler, English are going to start founding colonies up and down this coast. Let's say that you're an indentured, you don't like what your master's doing. Maybe you can't bring the complaints to courts, or he's friends with the judges or whatever. Hey, take off. Some of these ships are looking for sailors. Hop on there, become a merchant marine. Maybe just run up. You're in Virginia. Maryland's about to be settled. Just go up there, make a new life for yourself. A lot of, it's not like they have facial recognition software. You could just go a couple miles up the road even, and you can start a new life. And maybe this guy's going to eventually locate you, but a good chance he's not. You get out of your contract that way. So you just paid for this guy to come over. After a month, he's gone. You don't get a return on your investment. Another problem for these planners is a lot of these indentured, particularly those from highlands areas or really cold areas like in Scotland and Ireland, aren't going to survive the terms of their contract because of disease. So when the English come over, they're coming to a region that's hotter than mainland England. Now, England itself, you'll sometimes see malaria make its way up there, but you never see yellow fever get there. And yellow fever and malaria is very rare in places like Scotland and Ireland, so you don't have any acquired or inherited immunities to those diseases. So a lot of these indentures come over, you pay tons of money for their passage over, they get over, get malaria. Malaria, if you get it as an adult, you never had it as a child. It's incredibly hard to get over. So this guy's going to die very quickly. So indentures will continue to be used, and there's plenty that are going to make it through their contract, be worth the money, but there's a lot that won't make it through the end of their contract. But here's a really big issue that some of these planners are going to have with these indentures. Even those who make it through their contract, when you get to the end of the contract, what does that indenture then become to the planner? So he reaches his 7 years. He gets his land. He's come over to the New World. They promised land if you come to the New World. The master had paid his passage over. 7 years is done, or 6 years, or 5 years, whatever the terms of the contract. He gets to the end of this thing, gets his 100 acres. Now he's got his former boss, just down the road from him. He's now going to grow tobacco too. So he's now become competition to the guy he was just working for. You've basically invited in somebody that could possibly undercut you, grow tobacco better than you. You've trained them. So you've created competition where there wasn't competition before. So indentures are going to be, again, a big source of labor, but some people are going to say, I don't know if this solves the labor problem, all right? So some English are going to look to other forms of labor. We'll see the English, at least in some instances, try to turn to Indian prisoners of war. So unlike the Spanish, the English didn't have these laws where if you captured somebody in war and they were non-Christian, you could enslave them for life. That's not on the books with the English when they first arrived. But what you did have is if you get into conflict with somebody, you capture them, you can basically use their labor for the terms of the conflict, or, if you accuse them of a crime like, Palatines after the massacre of 1622, conspiring against us or something like that, you can then force somebody to work for you for a period of time. So during the massacre of 1622, as a retaliating against the Palatines, they captured a number of Palatines, and basically they're going to they don't have prisons back then or anything, so they're going to take some of these Indian prisoner of wars and they're going to lease them to planters. So we'll see when this English get into conflict with Indians, which they're going to continue to over and over throughout the 1600s, 1700s, some prisoners will come with these conflicts. So you're a planter, you need your land worked, maybe you got some indentures, but let's go ahead and lease an Indian prisoner of war. So he's taken prisoner of war. Maybe you pay the House of Burgesses or you pay the local government to take this Indian prisoner, and basically you say, all right, Powhatan or whatever tribe he's from, go ahead and start planting this tobacco, start picking this tobacco. This is now your job. All right, well, this POW, what is this first thing he's going to do the second you turn around? So a lot of times these various prisoners, Indian prisoners, coming from just right down the road. This guy's from a village here. Now you're trying to put him to work on a plantation here. Second this guy turns his back, boom, he's home. He just runs away. He's back home. He's with his family. You're not. You spent all this money and this guy just ran away. Even if you successfully keep these prisoners of war in the area, they're going to die of diseases in a significant ratio. You start putting people of Indian ancestry with less immunities to a lot of these diseases in close contact with the English. They're going to die even at higher rates than you'd see from people of the Highlands of Ireland and Scotland. So disease is going to be a major issue. So some people are going to determine, all right, this isn't the solution to this labor problems. Free labor's not answering it. Indentured servitude, that comes with problems. Indian labor, this isn't working. This is going to lead the English first in Virginia, but we'll see it expand throughout the colonies, and in particular, these southern colonies turn to a different form of labor. What I'm about to try to explain is something that it's almost impossible to explain. In part, this is because the documents simply don't exist on early African slavery in these English colonies, but also it's going to be trying to explain how one group of people determines it's okay to enslave a different group of people, and from a point where they didn't have any slavery before, but now they're going to adopt it in fairly short order. So we're going to be talking about why these English colonies, particularly Virginia, and starting with Virginia, will turn to African slavery when there had been no African slavery before these colonies are founded, but how it's going to go from non-existent to legalized into a major form of labor in the South and southern colonies, and as we'll actually see it in northern colonies as well, though to a lesser extent. So how does this happen? Again, I'm going to give an explanation. I don't know if my explanation is correct because the documents, we just simply don't have enough of them. I've heard a couple different explanations here. Probably the one that I believe does the best job is this sort of Marxist interpretation. When I say Marxist interpretation, it's basically this idea, if you're a Marxist historian, you say that money drives history. This event happens, humans act this way for the purpose of acquiring capital, and who has the money makes the decisions. That's a Marxist historian. Now, I'm not generally a Marxist historian. I think that obviously money does factor into a lot of historical events, decision making, that type of thing. But I think people do stuff for other reasons, cultural reasons, security reasons. I think there's plenty of other explanations besides money. But the reason that I think that we're going to see in these English colonies, particularly Virginia, this turn to African slavery, I don't know how else to explain it besides money, okay? So what we're going to see, and this begins in 1619, so this is actually before the massacre of 1622. This is before this becomes a royal colony. 1619, we're going to have a ship. So this is an English ship, is going to pull into port in Jamestown with, and this is a quote, 20 or so odd Negroes, okay? 20 or so odd Negroes. That's all it says. It doesn't say slaves, but it says 20 or so odd Negroes. And this ship that's going to be pulling in is a pirate ship. So as we mentioned, Jamestown has become this hub for tobacco, but it was originally founded as a place where you can offload goods that you pirated. Well, this English pirate ship had just basically attacked a Spanish ship. The Spanish, as we've talked about, are using African slaves, non-Christians. They're non-Indians, non-Christians, so it's okay to enslave them per the Spanish crown. So they were bringing slaves to the Caribbean. Yeah, I'm kind of simplifying things here because there's actually a couple different pirate groups involved. But this English vessel ended up with these slaves. So the Spanish are using slaves, English vessel attacks them and takes on the cargo, and part of this cargo includes these 20 or so odd Negroes. So we have these people that come into an area where slavery is not legalized. All right, well, what happens to these people? Some people are going to argue they just immediately became slaves. I don't think that's true. Some people say they were just freed. I don't think that's true either. And we know they don't necessarily become slaves because what we'll see is in the 1620s, a number of African people of African descent will actually start owning land in Virginia and actually become successful planters. And we think that some of these came from this initial group. So, that basically says maybe they became free. Maybe they got here, the English said, we don't have slavery, we're going to let you go. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. So what I think happens, and again, this is an interpretation, we have a number of different interpretations, is this ship comes in and they're going to offload these people, and basically the pirate ship captain is going to say, I just freed you. I want to get paid. I've fed you, as soon as you got here. I'm not going to take you back to Africa or anything like that. And I don't want to just let you go for free. So what we think maybe happens is that these Africans, that were being taken into slavery to a Spanish colony, were maybe sold as indentured. So to pay for the passage, to pay for me freeing you, I'm going to sell you to this guy for a term of 5 years, 6 years, something like that. And we'll see these Africans serve as indentures in these colonies. And this is just going to be the first group. We'll see a couple other Africans come from the Caribbean, some from Africa, for a variety of different reasons, show up in Virginia and be treated as indentures, all right? So on paper, they'd be the same as, an indentured coming from England, Ireland, Scotland. You work for a period of 6, 7 years, whatever the terms agreed upon are, and then at the end of this term, you're free. Again, we think this might be the case because we have examples of blacks becoming successful planters alongside whites in Virginia. It's actually really interesting seeing guys like Anthony Johnson is probably the most famous example. Black man became a successful planter in Virginia. All right, so we think some these 20 or so odd Negroes became indentured servants. So how does it go from indentured servitude with Africans to African slavery, but it doesn't go with indentured servitude from the Irish to Irish slavery or Scottish slavery? Well, again, this is where I think the money thing comes in. When you have these African indentures, they're not going to be able to do certain things that indentures from Ireland, Scotland, England are going to be able to do. So as we talked about, if you bring an indentured from Ireland, after the British take over the area, or you bring them from England or Scotland, they basically are subject to the crown. If a master is treating them poorly, they can appeal to the local court and say, I'm a subject of England, I'm being mistreated. And the court has to listen to them because they're British subjects, and they can maybe get the master to, get them out of the contract or provide proper shelter, things like that. If you're from Africa, you don't have that right. So you're not considered a British subject. So you're not going to be able to complain if, as an indentured, the master is mistreating you. So this means that masters are going to be able to capitalize and extract more work out of African indentures than they would Irish or Scottish or English. All right, another thing, maybe against different than Irish or Scottish indentures, or maybe English indenture from the city, people from Africa, agricultural. Most of the people brought from Africa are going to be farmers. They're going to have experience farming. So somebody coming from Scotland, Ireland, they're just used to raising sheep, or from the city, they've never farmed before. They don't have the experience, and so you got to take that period of time to train them. That's less work you're going to be able to extract from them. Okay, running away. If you are English, Irish, Scottish, you can just hop up to the next colony, or you can maybe get on a boat, go back to England or Ireland or whatever, and you're going to be able to escape. You're going to be sort of be able to blend into the local populace. If you're somebody from Africa, somebody again maybe captured from a pirate ship, Spanish were taking you, but now you're brought here, you're probably not going to be able to run away. You're certainly not going to be able to run back home, back to Ireland. You're not going to be able to run to the next colony and blend in, or at least not as easily as we're going to see those from Europe would be able to blend in. So you're going to have less indentures running away when you have indentures of African descent. Disease. Again, people from especially Highlands areas hadn't had certain diseases as a kid. A lot of people coming from Africa, particularly those from equatorial regions where malaria, yellow fever are present, you're going to get people coming over with acquired and inherited immunities. And so a lot of these guys are going to survive the terms of their contracts, whereas, I'm just making this number up, maybe you have 5 English, Irish, Scottish indentures, and 3 of those die of disease before the end of their terms. Maybe it's only 1 of the Africans because of these acquired immunities. And in particular, people from sub-Saharan Africa have this immunity to malaria. So that is going to be, again, another thing that's going to make those who use these African indentures more money. All right, so if you take in these factors, what this means is that those in Virginia, and again, this starts in Virginia, but we'll see this happen in other English colonies as well, those that use African indentures are going to more often than not get a return on their investment than, again, somebody using from Europe or another location. So what I think happens, what some historians think happens, is that when you get this, we'll get those who use African indentures making more money than those who use these other forms of labor. And once that begins to happen, you'll see those guys at the top sort of say, if I'm making this much from indentures, why don't we just go ahead and do what the Spanish are doing and just go ahead and make it legal to enslave people from Africa. And so this is going to be these local laws. They'll be established in Virginia, and again, you'll see this process in other English colonies. Well, you'll start slowly seeing these measures put in place to where slavery becomes legal. African slavery becomes legal. For example, in Virginia, you'll have rules saying in late 1600s or mid 1600s to the early 1700s, you'll have laws being put on the books saying basically what the Spanish had said. Anyone coming from a non-Christian nation can be made into a slave. They say that's okay. So that's going to be a law passed in by the House of Burgesses. Another law will say that a child born to a slave would become a slave themselves. And this doesn't happen immediately, but this is going to start slowly happening. So, okay, it's okay to make somebody a slave. It's okay to make a slave's child a slave. So you'll slowly see, just to this one particular group, these rights being taken away. And once that begins to happen, again, those who are making the money will start profiting even more. And then when that follows, you sort of going to start to see these justifications for slavery. So as the 1600s proceeds into the 1700s, now those who are using African indentures are now using African slaves, and you're going to see ships coming in. As England, first they're going to buy them from the Spanish and Portuguese. There's a whole story behind that. But then eventually England's going to get its own ports in Africa, and they're going to start bringing in slaves. And then you're going to see these justifications for slavery. Okay, so it's okay to do this because we don't feel that these people are, we feel they're inferior to us. And that's going to come along. And then it's sort of, the laws are going to be easier to pass because you have this justification that goes along with it. So it doesn't start immediately. I think it starts because of money, and again, there's plenty of other explanations out there. I encourage you to look at them, but I think because of this, we see this slowly devolution from indentured servitude to slavery. And by really the early 1700s, slavery is pretty much legalized in Virginia. By the mid 1600s, you see, you know, certain laws passing making African slavery legal, but then by the early 1700s, fully legal, not only to enslave people, but to sell their children. Once this begins to happen, and again, it starts here in Virginia, but we'll see it happen in other English colonies, you're going to see England begin participating in the African slave trade. And once they start participating in it, and also the French, and we'll talk about the French engaging in African slavery as well, you'll see what had begun with the Spanish and Portuguese expand into almost an industry. And what we're going to talk about is how Spain, Portugal, and then later on France and England will begin this African slave trade, okay? All right, so how is this African slave trade going to work? Well, as we've talked about before, Spain and Portugal had been making inroads around sub-Saharan Africa. Portugal had started in the 1490s, going to these various areas in Asia. Spain had gotten on board in the late 1400s. And the way that these guys would operate is they would set up these coastal forts along the coast of Africa. And what they would do is they would trade with the people of sub-Saharan Africa. So what they would do is you come here, you basically establish a fort, and you're going to have these coastal nations. These people along this area. Think of Africa, and I made a map. I don't know if I included it here, but people of these coastal regions, have this nation here, this nation here, this nation here, and they're at war with their neighbors. Sometimes they're at peace with their neighbors. But let's say this nation right here had just gotten engaged in a war with this nation over here, and in this war they captured some prisoners of war. Well, now you have these prisoners of war. Differs, the laws differ for each African nation, but a number of these nations would basically say it's okay to sell these prisoner of war as slaves. Pretty similar to what the Spanish would do with the Moors during the Reconquista. Well, the Portuguese and Spanish show up, and they have goods that sub-Saharan Africans don't have. They, sort of this trade deficit because of the Sahara Desert means that firearms are extremely rare down here. Certain textiles are rare down here. So when the Africans and when the Spanish and Portuguese show up, they're going to start trading their goods for, certain items, ivory, certain types of wood, and they're also going to get these POWs. So, all right, I have these goods. How about I trade you this guy captured in war over here? And they're going to trade them to the Spanish and Portuguese, and then the Spanish and Portuguese will ship them to the New World. Now, as we talked about, this is going to start all the way back in the 1490s. We'll see the Tainos replaced with African slaves, and this is going to go on throughout the early 1500s. Okay, so this is going to begin this slave trade, and the way that this would work, well, let me just point this out. During the late 1400s and 1500s, this is almost it's almost incidental. I don't know if incidental is the right word. It's not a major concern to the Spanish and Portuguese. Portugal's going to end up colonizing this area of Brazil. Spain, as we talked about, is going on these expeditions of conquest. Spain is, as a matter of fact, isn't too concerned about African slavery because their Indian population of the areas where they're at is so substantial. Even after disease, they're going to have plenty of laborers they can work with. And even after the new laws come out saying you can't use Indians as slaves, they're going to come up with other ways to use Indian labor like debt peonage. You don't need to get slaves from Africa because there are other places to use them. Now, as we'll talk about later, in the Caribbean, we're going to see African slavery become really big. But during the 1400s, 1500s, it's sort of on the side, all right? Things are going to change and increase when the French and the English get involved. And this isn't sort of forgiving the Spanish and Portuguese because they're going to do it, but basically the English and when the French get involved, it's going to become almost like an industry. What you'll see is the English and French will eventually set up their own bases, and they're going to sort of do the same thing. We have these goods, we'll get the POWs you took in war. Well, as these various European groups start showing up, which they do in more and more numbers towards the end of the 1500s, early 1600s, what this is going to let these coastal groups do is you no longer are going to have enough POWs to trade for these goods. So maybe you in this nation right here, you're getting some goods from the Portuguese, but this nation down here, there's a Spanish thing here, they're getting more guns than you. So, all right, we don't have enough POWs. We haven't been to war with anybody, but this guy down here is getting more guns than us. So, unless we get more guns, this guy's going to move on our territory and take us over. So, maybe what this nation will do is use the guns they acquired from the Portuguese to attack a nation to the east, and they'll create war for the purpose of acquiring slaves. Because if you don't, then the other nations will do it, and they're going to end up beating you in war. So, what we'll almost see is these wars break out for the purpose of acquiring slaves to trade to these Europeans. And the way that a lot of these would work is you would basically, some people will claim, people are selling their brothers or something to slavery. That's ridiculous. I mean, sometimes you would see coastal nations sell debtors or sell prisoners in, but nobody's selling their brother for no reason. That's stupid. It's going to be selling POWs you capture in war. But what is true is that sometimes these wars will be fought for the purpose of capturing POWs. So this guy declares war on his neighboring nation, and he's going to start using the guns to go into this territory, raid, to acquire slaves, then bring them to the coast to acquire more guns. And now this guy's going to be better armed to not only resist his neighbor, but maybe to make war on a different nation to acquire these guns. And what's going to happen is you'll start to see these expeditions set off into the interior of Africa, and basically Africa beginning 1600s when the slave trade becomes really big. Africa will almost go to war with itself because of the introduction of these arms. So if you don't want to lose to your neighbor, you've got to get these groups what they want, and that's going to be POW slaves. And so I've got to beat this guy. I have to acquire more slaves. So now you start sending these expeditions even further into the interior. And what's going to happen is basically this causes a power imbalance where the coastal African nations will become extremely powerful because of the guns they acquire, and the interior nations are going to almost become prey to people trying to capture these weapons to give to the Europeans to, again, make themselves more powerful. And if you don't do that, you're going to lose to your neighbors. They're going to take you over because they're going to be doing it. I mean, it's one of these things where, you wish somebody could have stepped up and said, no, I'm not going to treat slaves. This is wrong. And I'm sure a lot of people did say that. But those who did say that, they're probably going to get taken over by the neighbors. So what these coastal groups will start doing is they're going to start sending these expeditions in the interior. And a lot of these people in the interior, they have no relations to the people on the coast. They don't speak the same language. They don't know anything about people on the coast. A lot of these people in the interior don't even know the idea of the coast. You're just, this is just sort of, the ocean is a concept you don't even understand. But now you're getting these people coming into the interior that are armed with guns. And again, guns are rare in sub-Saharan Africa. So maybe you're from this interior nation. You've never seen guns before. This group shows up from the coast. They're going to start raiding villages. And it's not going to be, where you just go grab one person out of a village. Generally, it'll be a coastal group comes in, takes a whole village, locks everybody up. Maybe they go to the neighboring village. Maybe this is a village where your cousins are at. Maybe it's a village you're, enemies with. Normally you'd be fighting them, but now you're going to be both enslaved, and then you're going to be brought from the interior hundreds of miles to the coast, sometimes over 1,000 miles to the coast. And you're going to be locked up. The way they'll usually do this is sometimes these collars, and this is sort of demonstrated here. This guy right here would be one from one of these coastal African groups. You can see he's wearing the European clothes acquired from Europeans in trade. I assume this is a gun. I don't know if that's the case or not. And maybe this guy has a gun right here. But you're bringing these people from the interior. They've never seen this guy before. They've never seen this guy before. We've certainly never seen Europeans before, maybe never seen the coast before, and you're locked up with people that, your neighbors, your family. Maybe you're locked up with people from the neighboring village that you hate, something like that. And then you're going to be brought to the coast. When you get to the coast, you're now going to be sold to Europeans. So you're brought to a Spanish fort. Europeans generally didn't go into the interior themselves. A lot of different reasons for this. Some is the disease factor. A lot of Europeans, because you're in these hot coastal regions, don't have these immunities to certain diseases. So they're going to wait on the coast, maybe just wait in their ship. They'll until slaves are brought to the port. Again, Spanish and Portuguese, later English and French will set up these coastal forts, and you're going to have people brought from the interior, and then the Europeans are going to buy however many slaves they need. Okay, maybe this boat right here is somebody being brought from the interior now. Maybe this person's family's being sold away, and then once you're taken in by these Europeans, would be brought on small boat out to European ships. Here would be an example of a European fort in off coastal Africa. Again, after a while, enough slaves are brought in, the ship shows up, and you're going to bring the slaves to the ship. Once you're on board the ship, you're going to be initially packed into these vessels that are made for maybe fishing or made for maybe transporting cargo. But as time progresses, and specifically in the middle of the 1600s, this is when we specifically start to see it, is you'll start seeing these ships show up that are made for the purpose of carrying human cargo, meaning that they're designed to where you can pack as many humans in without killing these humans. You don't want people to die because you want to maximize your profit at the end. And you're going to pack as many humans as you can into these slave ships for transportation to the New World. So, I think the space is 3 by 6, so you're going to be sort of cramped in into these small holds, and you're going to have to sit here. If you're going to Brazil, maybe a month, but if you're going to North America and these British colonies, you're going to be going for 2 months, crammed into these corners. And for these 2 months, you're going to be kept alive. What they'll basically feed people is gruel, which is barely cooked wheat, and it's highly caloric, but it's not very nutritional. You'll be fed this, but a lot of times you'll have to, there's no room for defecation, or you'll have to urinate on yourselves, and so like for this time period, you're going to just see people laying in their waste a lot of times, just fed and barely enough to keep people alive. And imagine you're on this thing for 2 months. You're crammed into people. Maybe you know people next to you. Maybe that's a guy from an enemy nation that you hate next to you. Maybe you know the language of the people around you. Maybe they were captured from a different part of Africa, and you're sort of just jammed into this area with people different than you. And then the people at the top of the ship, different skin color than you. It's going to be for a very horrific experience. Now, people call the actual part from Africa to the Americas the Middle Passage, or sometimes see the first Middle Passage. I basically consider, when they get captured until they're being sold in the New World, that's the whole Middle Passage here. So you're going to be brought on this ship again. You might not have ever seen the ocean before, so you might be getting seasick. Almost certainly you've never been on a boat like this before. You'll notice here, these are children. You have special sections for children. Sometimes you keep women passengers away from men passengers. Sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes female passengers will be raped by the crew members of the ship. Sometimes fellow passengers. And again, for 2 months you're going to have to endure this. What we'll see is about 10 to 13 million, you get different estimates, people will be captured in Africa and then brought to these European boats and then brought to the New World. Now, the majority of these people, probably 90% or so, again, I see different estimates, will be brought to either Brazil or the Caribbean. And this is going to be initially the Spanish and Portuguese. Later on, we'll talk about this later, the British or English and the French will start acquiring some islands in the Caribbean. Then you'll start seeing them brought to the British and French areas. But about 90% will be brought to Brazil and the Caribbean, where they're going to be put to work on sugar plantations. So if you're captured in Africa, it's more than likely you're going to end up in Brazil or in the Caribbean working on a sugar plantation. But about 10%, so maybe a million or so, again, I hear different estimates, are going to be brought to these English colonies. And this really starts about the mid-1600s when you start seeing slavery become legalized in the Chesapeake region. So 10 to 13 million people. And again, think about all the wars that happen down here and all the, sort of uh, arms imbalance. And this is going to sort of turn this to this hellacious period here in Africa. And then if you're somebody who's captured, you're going to be brought, again, physically distressing, emotionally distressing. You're brought to this new area, looks nothing like you're used to. A lot of people don't even comprehend where they're at. Again, if you've never seen the ocean, how can you imagine where you're at? You're just locked in this wooden prison for a month, 2 months. You're brought to this area. You'll actually see some slaves try to escape and then try to run home because they don't understand they're on an entirely different continent. But most brought to the Caribbean and Brazil. Again, you get offloaded. Once you're offloaded, you're going to be generally put into these slave pens where you're going to be sold by a slave trader. Sometimes you'll be, and this is the way they would put it, fattened up for people who want to purchase slaves. You don't want to see somebody that's skinny and having endured this 1 month to 2 month voyage. So you'll keep them for a month, and then maybe you'll dress them nicely, and then you'll get these plantation owners come to the slaveholders at the coast, and they'll purchase the slaves. Again, if you are majority of slaves will be brought to Brazil and the Caribbean. By the way, work in these areas, Brazil and the Caribbean, is going to be pretty awful because sugarcane harvesting is so bad that there's a number of deaths. And as a matter of fact, just because the tropical environment, disease is going to pass more easily, so there's going to be a number of deaths because of that. So good chance you're going to die here in the Caribbean or on this area. Now those slaves, and by the way, I should point out another reason that you're going to see a lot of slaves sold to this region is because you want to get rid of the human cargo to replace it with sugar, other cargo you get here for the return voyage to Europe. So offload slaves, pick up sugar, make your way back to Europe. But again, about 7-10% of slaves will be brought up here to North America. Maybe 1 million or so people will be brought to the Americas, and the majority are going to be brought to this U.S. South region. So initially Virginia, but later on when South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Maryland are settled, we're going to see that they'll be a big part of the labor in those regions as well. Again, some slaves will be brought to the north also. But brought to the Caribbean, put to this horrible work. But if you're brought to Virginia, again, imagine you're offloaded and you have these guys. Again, the people that were running the ship probably look something like them, but these guys speak a different language because most of the, well, not all the time, but a good chunk of the people selling these slaves were Portuguese and Spanish. But now you have a guy, looks like those guys, but now he's speaking English. Of course, you don't understand English versus Spanish or Portuguese, and maybe you're put to work on a plantation picking tobacco, and you're going to be put to work against people that might have the same skin color as you, but they're probably from a different part of Africa as you, different type of scarring, there was the ritual scarring, different type of language. Now you're put to work around these people. It's hard to form a family bonds, things like that. Eventually, the slaves will sort of become acculturated. A lot will start to learn English. Second generation certainly learn English. But for these first generations, being tossed into this situation, I mean, again, not only physically distressful, but emotionally distressful too. So 13 million people are going to be brought in this. Again, 7%, upwards of 1 million brought to the United States. I've heard as low as 300,000 in the United States, but or what's going to be the United States, but that's still a substantial portion. All right, so slavery is going to become a huge labor thing here in Virginia initially, but we're going to see other colonies be formed in the South, and they're going to follow almost the exact same pattern as Virginia. So Virginia, first colony given to the Virginia Company. The way that Virginia operated is it started making money off a cash crop. Once you started seeing tobacco become big, then more and more people move here. They're going to acquire land. Again, the English don't understand that these Indians' hunting ground is, they basically don't see their hunting ground as their land. The English start moving into this, chase away these animals. The Palatines, obviously, as we talked about, don't have the domesticated animals like they do. You're chasing away our protein. They're going to attack. So first it's the Palatines, then this Indian group, then this Indian group. Open up all this land. There's going to be the same pattern for these various other colonies. And then once you see this open land, you start seeing indentured servants and slaves come in. So Virginia is founded 1607. We're going to see in 1632, the king will grant a charter to a different group to settle Maryland. Same thing's going to happen here in Maryland. They come in, basically, they'd seen Virginia colony making money off tobacco. The proprietors of Maryland will establish their own government. The government, initially is going to be independent. Eventually, the king will send a governor over to sort of oversee things, but it's going to be the same pattern. Start planning for cash crops, push away local Indian groups once they attack because they see their land taken, and then defeat them with the superior technology, then push them west, opened up a lot of new land, bring in indentured servants and slaves. Okay. Carolinas, we're not going to talk about why these are founded. Initially just one colony, but same pattern. Come in here, set up your own government. The king gives you a charter for this land. You run things how you want. Eventually a royal governor is going to come over to make sure the king gets a cut of whatever's being taken. The people start moving in, making money off of cash crop, push away local Indian groups, and then import slaves and indentured servants. So think about these southern colonies in the same way you thought about Virginia. Just know that they're each going to have their own charter, each going to set up their own government, and the government's pretty much going to be run independently of the king, but the MO is going to be the same. Cash crops with people coming in, working for themselves, but then also bringing in indentures, and then also bringing in African slaves. And again, they're all going to go through the same pattern of slavery becoming legalized over time. All right, so this is how the southern colonies are going to work. Now, I shouldn't paint a completely broad brush of how these colonies are going to work because there will be some differences, like these upper south areas. They're going to be primarily tobacco. We will see different crops down here. South Carolina, be rice, indigo, things like that. But the basic MO is the same. All right, so this is Virginia, and this is going to start the colonization of these southern areas. We don't normally, when we talk about English settlement in the New World, not a lot of people begin with Virginia. You'll sometimes hear people talk about Pocahontas and John Smith and Jamestown, but a lot of times people just skip past them and talk straight about a different group. What we're going to do next time is we're going to talk about this group and maybe explain or try to figure out why we focus on this group as opposed to what we just talked about with Jamestown.